The Last of Us, Episode 4. After last week's emotional masterpiece, we return with Joel and Ellie as they are trying to head over to Wyoming, which means taking a detour through Kansas City. This allows time for Joel and Ellie to bond. It's kind of the first real moment where we've just kind of had the two of them alone, bonding, trying to get to know each other, sort of warming up to the idea of being friendly with each other. But obviously the problem is this segment in game is so much longer and so much bigger. So, as a player of the game, it's one of those things where you feel like you really go on a longer journey with them. So you kind of get their bonding experience like spaced out more. Whereas here, it feels like they're not necessarily rushing it, but they are doing it quicker. And we all know that like a story being told longer is sort of a better way of rooting it in and making it more effective. But obviously that's just a perspective that maybe only players of the game will have compared to people that have only seen the show. The bonding moments were nice, however. She tells him the dad jokes. He eventually starts to find them funny, and we see the trust form after she saves him in what was a really exciting action sequence. When they get ambushed, that was very tense. It was just very well executed. I liked the way it was shot. It wasn't too many like quick cuts and the camera waving all over the place. It was just like very focused on it, intense. You could feel the violence. The shots popping off sounded very like just very loud, very authentic. So that was a very good sequence. Whilst most of the episode was with them, we do spend a bit of time with the militia who are essentially running the city and their leader called Kathleen. Now, Kathleen is new. She is not in the game, and I guess her addition here does make sense because in the game you are just sort of killing these mindless, repetitive NPCs, and that's not like a criticism of the gameplay or anything, but it's just true. You just sort of sneak around, get in fights, kill the same sort of NPCs in order to get to your next objective, and that's obviously just part of the gameplay. It makes it fun, sneaking around, killing the enemy. It's what it's all about. But the point is, there's no like leader or sub leader in any of those moments in the game. It's just about killing the enemies in order to get to the point. Whereas in here they have added like a leader for these militia people. The problem is though, I didn't really enjoy cutting away from our two lead characters. That's where I thought the best moments of this entire episode was sticking with Joel and Ellie. But we did cut away from him at times. But the only thing Kathleen and her soldiers offered was the mention of Henry and Sam, who are, if you have played the game, they're like important characters to the story. So, it's like I would notice those moments, and so would other people that were familiar with it, and be like, okay, that's interesting. Henry and Sam, we're going to see them soon, I'm sure. But I really didn't care for Kathleen or her militia. Henry and Sam get introduced at the end of the episode as they find Joel and Ellie. We know Henry and Sam are trying to flee the city and this controlling militia, and Joel and Ellie will plan to do the same. There's not really a whole lot to say about this episode. I'm sure, like, to people that haven't played the game, that's quite a cliffhanger. To players of the game, it's not really the biggest cliffhanger because we kind of know how that's going to pan out. But yeah, this episode was decent. There was a fair bit of downtime that allowed for bonding and some funny moments, especially in this episode, that, quite cute moments between Joel and Ellie. But this was a shorter episode, and it definitely did feel like a shorter episode, especially compared to last week's. And honestly, right now, I'm struggling to see what adding this Kathleen character offers. I really feel like this segment of the show does not need a lead villain character. I just do not feel like it's necessary. At this point, I've been very positive of the deviations the show has made compared to the game, but in this instance, I feel like the show would have benefited from staying a little bit closer to the original game layout of this segment in Kansas City. For example, the famous elevator segment from the game, that is a great segment. I feel like that is something they could definitely, adapt for this episode. I think that would have been a good segment to throw in there. Of course, maybe I'll eat my words. Maybe they're saving that somehow for next week's episode, but it doesn't really feel like they are because it comes at a certain time. So I just feel like they've kind of completely cut that out, and it's a very exciting and scary part of the game, and I just feel like it would have been good to have that in this episode. But as a whole, I just want to see more infected, more clickers, more bloaters. I know I've said before that it's not the primary focus of this story. It's not, infected aren't the primary focus, but it feels like we've kind of gone 2 episodes in a row now where we've barely seen infected. In fact, we saw none in today's episode. But I do feel like the show would benefit from including a little bit more that happens in the game. I think players of the game would really appreciate that a lot as well, and I just feel like the show is missing out on some potentially great stuff to be showing on the screen. I'm not mad at this episode, but I do definitely feel like it's the weakest, and I just feel like they strayed a little bit too far from the source material. I understand they're trying to adapt it so it flows better as a TV show, but honestly, I don't feel like this, little villain character they've added offers much, and I just think they've skipped over some really cool stuff that happens in game. It does definitely feel like one of those episodes where you've been waiting a week and it just felt a little bit too short. It just felt like it didn't quite provide you with enough. I think if you were binging this show, it wouldn't be a problem. This episode would be like, oh yeah, it's just pretty good. On to the next one, like just play it because you just want to see some more. I just don't think this episode provided quite enough, but it's still decent. It's still a good episode of TV. I don't really have any major complaints. 7 out of 10. It's interesting with the show because episodes 1, 2, and 4 kind of feel like they're similar. They feel like they kind of have a similar structure, similar layout, similar pacing. Whereas episode 3 was a bit of an anomaly for the season so far, yet it was the best episode, which is quite interesting because it's the episode that actually, stepped away from the main characters in order to tell a little side story. I gotta say, so far this show doesn't quite flow the best because of that episode 3. Yeah, episode 3 was really fucking good, so it's a tricky one. It's going to be interesting to see how the rest of this show pans out and whether it has like a smooth flow, because right now I don't feel like it's quite the smoothest run from episode to episode. But yeah, The Last of Us episode 4, have you seen it? What do you think about it? How do you think the show's going in general so far? Do feel free to let me know, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.